Stop. Okay, Parashat Vayishlach. Let's begin. We're doing Perek Lamed Hey, Psukim Aleph through Yud Aleph, page 186. It's the post Shechem Beit El, right? Post Shechem, we go to Beit El, and then we have the death of Devorah and Yaakov's name change to Yisrael. So let's take a look at these 11 psukim. But before we do, just an observation. After Shechem, the story has three events. After Shimon and Levi take revenge against Dinah's defilement, the story has three more events that occur. Yaakov prepares his family for the return to Beit El and meeting their grandfather for the first time, and his father, the reunion of Yaakov, his family, with Yitzchak. That's story one. Devorah dies after he returns to Beit El. That's story two. Story three, and then she gets buried under a tree called Alon Bechut. Okay. And then the third story is Yaakov gets his name changed to Yisrael, right? Or an added name, shall we say. Not only will he be called Yaakov, he'll be called Yisrael. So what's the question? If we have three stories, is there a connection between the three? Or it just happens that haphazardly we have three stories. Rashi, quoting the Medrash Tanchuma, notes that all the troubles that happened to Yaakov can be traced to one factor. And that factor was he did not return to Beit El quick enough. It took him 21 years to return to his father in Yitzchak, and he's going to be punished, if you will, because it'll be the separation of him and Yosef for how many years? The exact name years of 21, right? Before he returns to see Yitzchak again, he never sees his mother again. His mother dies, and that's alluded, by the way, in these 11 psukim. So these psukim describe a progression for Yaakov. It follows his return to Beit El, right? That's from these psukim, the Rav feels we can learn lessons on how to act to this very day in particular when it comes to davening. A lot of allusions to how we are to approach tefillah are mentioned in these psukim as well. So now let's take a look at the story, and then we'll study the psukim. Vayomer Elokim el Yaakov, kum alei Beit El, v'shev sham, v'asei sham mizbeach lo el hanira elecho, v'varachacha mipnei Esav achicha. God said to Yaakov, arise, go up to Beit El, dwell there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from Esau, your brother. It's the same place that he had the dream of the ladder going into heaven, right? Rooted on the earth and going into heaven. Vayomer Yaakov el Beito. So now Yaakov tells his family, and whoever is with him as well, all of his servants, Asiru es Elohei hanechor asher b'solchechem v'hitaharu v'hachalifu simloschem. He tells them, well, we're getting ready, so discard all the avodah zaras, all the alien gods that are in your midst, cleanse yourselves and change your clothes. Pasuk Gimel. V'nakuma v'naleh Beit El, and then come and let us go up to Beit El. V'aseh sham mizbeach lokel ha'one osi b'yom tzarasi v'hi imodi b'derech hasher halachti. And there we will build, I will make there an altar, a mizbeach to God, who answered me in my time of distress. What was the time of distress? Well, there was numerous problems he encountered. Number one, he had to escape Esav. And number two, his whole encounter with Lavan wasn't one that was most desirable, right? And God was with me, and during my time of distress, was with me on the road that I traveled. Pasuk Dalet. Vayinu el Yaakov et kol Elohei hanechor asher biyadam ves hanizamim asher ba'oznehem vayitmom osam Yaakov tachas ha'ela asher im Shechem. So now they gave to Yaakov, because he told everybody they have to get rid of all of their avodah zarah. So they gave to Yaakov all the alien gods that were in their possession, as well as the rings that were in their ears. And Yaakov buried them underneath the tree near Shechem. Pasuk Vayiso vayi chitas Elokim al he'arim asher sivoseihem v'lo ratu acharei b'nei Yaakov. Something very important happened here. They set out, and their And there fell a godly terror on the cities. Nobody attacked them, even though they had done what? They had attacked Shechem, right? Shimon and Levi had massacred Shechem. No problem. It says terror was on these cities, and they didn't touch Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yaakov. Vayisu vayichitas. Oh, I'm sorry. Pasuk Vav. Vayavo Yaakov Luza asher be'eretz Canaan he Beit El hu v'chol am asher imo. Thus Yaakov came to Luz in the land of Canaan. It is Beit El. Another name for Beit El is Luz. He and all the people who were with him. Pasuk Zayin. Even Sham Mizbeach Vayikra Makom El Beit El Kisham Niglu Elav Elokim B'Varacho Mipnei Achiv. And he built in Mizbeach there and called the place Beit El, for it was there that God had revealed himself during his flight from his brother. When he ran away from Esau, that's what happened. Thomas Devara suddenly, and this pasuk is inserted here. Thomas Devara Menekas Rivka, Tikover mitachas lebeit El tachas alon, Vayikra Shmo alon bechus. Devara, the wet nurse of Rivka, died, and she was buried below Beit El, below the plateau, and it's named, and he named it Alon Bechut. Vayera Elokim El Yaakov od nevo mi Padan Aram vayivarich oso. And God appeared to Yaakov again when he came to Padan Aram, and he blessed him. Vayomer lo Elokim Shimcha Yaakov, lo yikra Shimcha od Yaakov, ki im Yisrael yeshmecha, vayikra Shemo Yisrael. Somebody is speaking, so can you please mute yourselves so we don't hear your conversation. Vayomer lo. So now, what does God do? God says, Elokim, he says, Shimcha Yaakov, your name is Yaakov. Lo yikra Shimcha od Yaakov, ki Yisrael yev Shemecha v'yikra Shemo Yisrael. Which really means it's not like Avram, he gets a total name change, because sometimes we will call him Yaakov, sometimes we will call him Yisrael. He's getting an added name here. That's what happens. Vayomer pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayomer lo Elokim ani kel shakai perei urevei goy ukahal goyim yamimeko umelachim mechalotzecho yetzeu. The last pasuk, and God said to him, "I am kel shakai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a congregation of nations shall descend from you. The king shall issue from your loins." Okay, let's go back and let's study these psukim. These 11 psukim. These 11 psukim are telling us, one second, I'm going to mute everybody and then unmute myself. Yes. Now, how do I unmute myself? How do I unmute myself? It's on the mute button.
Yeah, there should be on your. You don't. Let's see.
We hear you. You don't need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you can hear me? Very good. Thank you. Okay. Let's go back now and see the very beginning. Vayomer Elokim el Yaakov kum alei Beit El v'shev sham v'asei sham mizbeach. Arise, go up to Beit El, dwell there, and make an altar there to God. V'shev sham, dwell there, and then build an altar. Now he's going to Beit El. Where's he coming from? He's coming from Lavan, right? And he's going towards. He's encountered near Shechem. He's encountered Shechem, that whole story. And now they say, V'shev sham v'asei mizbeach. Go up to Beit El and then settle, right? And then build the mizbeach. But first he has to do what? He has to V'shev sham. He has to settle there. Then he builds the mizbeach. The Abarbanel suggests that Hashem instructs Yaakov to move on to Beit El for a pragmatic reason. Why does he have to move back to Beit El? He says, staying in the area of Shechem was simply too dangerous. They had just massacred Shechem, and the neighboring communities were going to do what? Simply, they were going to attack him. So Abravanel says, well, okay, you got to get out of the area. That's how Abravanel understands the whole progression here. It's a progression of pragmatism. Let's get you out of here and move to Beit El, which is a safer place. You won't be attacked there. But the Radak suggests a totally different approach. The Radak says that God instructs Yaakov to move onto Beit El from Shechem because that would encourage him. He says, since that was the place God had appeared to him on his way to Lavan, right? When he ran away from Esau, that was the place where he had his dream. And go back where you had your dream. Go back where you encountered HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you were running from Esau, because that was a good experience for you. And now we have to re-encourage you because Yaakov is very depressed. Shimon and Levi acted on their own without his endorsement. And now what's his feeling about that? Oh my God, what's going to happen to us? Yaakov takes a very pragmatic concern. What's his pragmatic concern? You violated my trust. You went into Shechem without my endorsement. You massacred them. What's going to happen? We're a few people, as he says, and we're going to be attacked. So the Radak says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what? Move on to Beit El. You need encouragement. Not like Abarbanel. Abarbanel understands it as a pragmatic move. Move away from danger. Go to a safer spot. Radak understands you're moving back to Beit El because that was a good spot for you. That's where you had Nevuah. That's where you were encouraged to move away from Esau, to run away from Esau. It was a good place for you. You got encouragement. Let's once again encourage you. Whatever the case, we need to note that in these words, there is a progression of activity being described, isn't there? The Seforno notes this. It contains a crucial lesson that still has implications on how the halacha understands we are to daven. We are to prepare for davening. In this pasuk, we are being told that Yaakov was told to travel to Beit El, settle there, v'shev sham, settle there, right? And then build your mizbeach. But the building was only to occur after v'shev sham. The Seforno notes he was not told to build a mizbeach and immediately after he arrived, but he was told, V'shev sham, stay there, and then build. He needed to contemplate, if you will, the Seforno says, all that transpired in his life. And then, only then, can you then daven? Can you then have a moment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? There's a process when it comes to davening. And the Gemara picks up on this, and the Gemara says, Tzadikim Harishonim, our original pious people taught us, meditate an hour before you pray. Pray for an hour, and then meditate an hour after you pray. Like it's a 3-hour business for Shachris. I don't know too many people that will do that. But it says, but the point is, you don't have to imitate the 3 hours. But what it's saying is it's saying you shouldn't run into shul. You shouldn't run into davening and open up the siddur, gobble it down, and get out. Rather, think about what you're doing. Think about your encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'shev sham. Stay there, and only after you stay there and you have time to contemplate what has transpired to you, then build the Mizbeach. That's how the Seforno says it, and that's how the Seforno understands. Ad Hayom Hazeh, to this very day, it's a lesson to us. There is an insightful observation made by the Hasidic masters that suggests that this story teaches us that it's not enough in life to ascend heights. You have to stay there, right? Once you ascend the mountain, you have to stay at the top of the mountain. One must also know that there's an art of not only climbing, there's an art of staying once you've ascended the mountain, if you will. This very idea is how we suggest to read the pasuk. Mi yaleh bahar Hashem umi yakum bimkom kodsho. Who will ascend the mountain and who will stay there? It's not one thing to ascend, it's another thing to stay there. So the first pasuk, if you will, Vayomer Elokim el Yaakov kum alei Beit El v'shev sham, is showing that there is a progression here. Yaakov is running away from Shechem. He's getting out of there. The Abarbanel says it's just a pragmatic approach, but under other Rishonim, other Meforshim like Radak and like Seforno say, we have a progression of an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu after Shechem. Because after Shechem, thank God, and the Torah documents it here, what happens? Nobody attacks him. It's like a miracle. You figured that you'd be attacked, right? It's like we went into Iran for 12 days, right? Not one of our planes was attacked. It's V'shev sham. It's like, wow. It's you got to think about that. You went, Yaakov had that experience, right? Shechem massacred. He didn't endorse it, but it did happen under his watch. His sons did it. He's worried about it. No. Everything remains quiet, and he's able to move on. Correct? That's what's happening here. So now he's going to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does he have to do to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He has to contemplate what just happened to me, right? Stop and think, process. What just happened to me? And the same thing after October 7th. We have an obligation to stop and think, what did happen to us? Where do we stand? Not just move on without paying attention to what happened. That's what the Meforshim, that's in particular the Sefarno, says to understand that opening pasuk. Okay, then he tells his children, Vayomer Yaakov el Beito vel kol asher imo, Hasiru es Elohei hanecho asher b'sochechem, v'hitaharu v'hachlifu simloseichem. What are you to do? Ibn Ezra notes that this alludes to the halacha that one is to wash themselves and clean their clothes before one approaches HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, he tells them, get rid of all of the Avodah Zaros. You're coming into shul, don't have Avodah Zaros, but we all have different Avodah Zaros on us. We all carry different Avodah Zaros. Lav dafka idols, icons in our pockets, but we have different Avodah Zaros. May it be our need for success, our need for money, our need for wealth, our need for possessions, whatever it may be, right? The Halacha says, "V'hi taharu v'haychlifu simloseichem." The Ibn Ezra says that's also no lesson about how we're supposed to come into daven. We're supposed to prepare. The halacha, by the way, says that one is to wash their hands. La halacha lamaisa. Reb Soloveitchik was very makpi, very strict. Even after he gave shir, and we sometimes have mincha in the late afternoon after a shir, and because the Rav would be returning, for example, to Boston, and he'd want a mincha, the Rav would not just go right into the shir and he'd get up from his desk, he'd go outside, he'd wash his hands, he'd come back in, because the halacha is, and that's learned from this pasuk, that you are to wash your hands before you begin davening. Okay, you should really prepare yourself accordingly. Pasuk Gimel, all we're learning from this experience of Yaakov. V'nakumu v'naleh Beit El, right? Now go up to Beit El. V'eseh sham mizbeach lo'el ha'one osi biyom tzarasi. And build what? Then go up to Beit El. I will make there, this is Yaakov talking, I'm going to make an altar to God who answered me in my time of distress. Correct? Who answered me in my time of distress. The Rav notes that it's amazing to see how Yaakov acts as he builds the Mizbeach back in Beit El, which was the spot where he had his dream when he was running from Esav, right? What does he do? Back in Pasuk Aleph in this parak, it recounts for us that Hashem came to Yaakov and told him to go to Beit El and build a Mizbeach right there, which was the place 21 years before he had his dream. And what did he do when he had his dream there? He bargained with God, or he wagered, but he made a promise. Right. He said, if you will go with me and protect me and come back with me and give me food to eat and clothing to wear, and I'm protected, I will come do what? I will come back to this spot and I will build a Mizbeach. As soon as I return from Lavan. So what is Hashem telling him? Hashem's saying, you got to fulfill your promise. You got to go back to Beit El. And that's what he's doing. What is fascinating to the Rav is how Yaakov responds to this obligation, right? He notes that Hashem did much more for him than just provide food and sustenance, correct? And clothing. That's what he asked for. If you remember all the way back at the beginning of the story, if God will give me lechem lechol beged lubosh, a piece of bread to eat, and a clothing to eat. Is that what he got? No, he got much more. But right, he got much more than that. Yaakov thanks Hashem for so much more. He doesn't thank Hashem for just what he promised him. He thanks Hashem. He realizes that he returned to Beit El. Whoa, a totally different person. He left Beit El with a stick in his hand, right? He returned a very powerful and wealthy man with a large family. He had asked for the basics, but he received enormous gifts. He defeated Shechem and was totally unscathed by that encounter. He Okay, let's try this. Let's continue on. Okay, so back to Pasuk Gimel. So Yaakov is responding, but the Rav is noting that he had to do the minimum to thank Hashem, and he does so much more. He answers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu so much more that he realizes what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given him, and he doesn't ignore that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him much more than lechem lechol ubeged lobosh, right? And this story, the Rav notes, taught us a lesson for eternity about how we should express gratitude in our lives when something is good done for us. If one grants a favor, the Rav writes, one should not limit his generosity to the minimum required. If one receives a favor, he should express thanks for all the generosity bestowed upon him. And that's what Yaakov is teaching us in these psukim as well. He's not only teaching us how to daven, he's teaching us how to say thank you. Thank you. I know I got so much more from you. Pasuk Daled. And he now removes all the jewelry, right, that they amassed in Shechem. Many of the Meforshim, by the way, note that the jewelry itself was fashioned into icons, believe it or not. We have a perception. How could they have worshipped Avodah Zarah? Right? Would they? What, they were dumb. They were idiots. We're the smart ones. We understood. There was a power to Avodah Zarah. And we just don't understand it because it is so foreign to us. We wouldn't think of bowing and worshiping an Avodah Zarah, an idol. Obviously, it was, number one, the culture of its time, and number two, they had a power that we don't relate to. We just don't understand it, but that was the power of it. Now, continue on.
Think television, think iPhone, think...
Right, okay, there you go. You're right. And they, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Here's today's Avodah Zarah.
Ancient man looked up to the stars, modern man down to the headlines, right? Exactly. Right. Okay, exactly. So they fashioned, the many Meforshim say, when they took off that jewelry, because the jewelry looked like Avodah Zarah's, was made in their honor as well. So Yaakov prepares his whole family to encounter and come back. And who are they going to be meeting, by the way? Yitzchak, right? The man who is supposed to be continuing the tradition from Avram that rejects totally Avodah Zarah. He says, listen, we're going to see Grandpa. We're going to see Zadie. We're not going to have any of this in our hands, right? So continue on. So they give him all of the earrings, etc. He buries them. He destroys them. The miracle of miracles, they didn't attack him. Though he attacked Shechem, they massacred Shechem. The fear was God put fear in all of the cities around. And therefore, Pasuk Vav, Vayavo Yaakov Luza Asher Beretz Canaan, he Beit El Hu V'chol Ha'am Asher Imo. He's able now to go up to Luz. That's another name for Beit El, and he doesn't encounter any static, if you will, any opposition from the people around him. Even Shamisbeach, and then he goes up to Beit El. He builds a mizbeach, and he calls it Beit El. This was the place where God appeared to him when he ran away from Esav. Now a pasuk enters, which is the main focus of this story. Atamas devora meinekes Rivka vatikaver mitachas the Beit El tachas alon. Suddenly, Devora, the wet nurse of Rivka, dies. Huh? What in the world is that doing here? And the other question is, do you know anything about Devorah? She is only mentioned once in Tanakh. It's right here in this pasuk. It's her death, and he buries her, Tachas Alani, and they call it Alon Bachut. What's the question? The question is, why are we interrupting this story with the death of a woman we know nothing about, and her burial is here? What's going on? Rashi notes that Devorah was the same nurse that Rivka had when she left her family to go marry Yitzchak. When Eliezer came, right? When Eliezer came to find her, to find a wife for Yitzchak, and he found Rivka, and Rivka agreed to leave Lavan and Betuel and Lavan. Who went with her? Devorah went with her. Clearly, this was Rivka's confidant, right? This was Rivka's tutor and confidant. Rivka had told Yaakov that she would now. So Rivka, now let's go. That's the connection to Rivka. Rivka and Devorah were connected from time immemorial. She was Rivka's confidant. Now the Rashi quoting the Medrash says, when Yaakov left, what did Rivka say? I will send for you, and when I send for you, you will come back. I will tell you when it is safe to return, that Esav has been placated. I will send for you. So according to the Mefarshim, Rivka sent her confidant. Who did she send to Lavan's house? She sent Devorah. Devorah, in other words, now you can see the whole story. Devorah is with them returning because she came to them and she said, Yaakov, now Rivka says, come home. So he's on his way home with his 12 children, 11 boys, 1 girl, with his 4 wives, with all of their wealth, and with whom? Devorah. So they're going back, and suddenly Devorah dies. But still, you have to wonder, why would the Torah record her death and whose death is not recorded? Whose death is not recorded? Rivka. Rivka's death is not recorded. And this is the only place in the Torah that we know anything about Devorah. What does this add to the story? Even if we use the Mefarshim that I just explained, it explains a little. Why insert it here? So the Rav explains the following. By now, we all appreciate that Rivka was an unusual woman, a woman of tremendous chesed. She's the one that gave Eliezer to drink. She's the one that watered all of the camels. She's the one that manifested tremendous chesed, even though she grew up in whose home? Betuel and Lavan's home, right? Furthermore, we must wonder, how did a woman who was raised in antithesis of everything that Avram and Sarah stood for? Betuel and Lavan are not models of Avraham's ideology. They're just the opposite. How did Rivka develop into the Rivka in such a milieu and become the second of our imahot, of our matriarchs? And the Rav suggests the answer to this question is Devorah. Devorah is the answer. Devorah, it belongs in this story. It's not an insertion like, what's it doing here? Devorah, this pasuk explains everything. It becomes the answer of, how did Rivka become Rivka? You have to ask, how did Rivka become Rivka? Devorah was her influence. The Rav says there was an underground community in Haran, an underground Jewish community in Haran, an Eish HaTorah underground. It's this underground community that taught the opposite of what Lavan and Betuel were preaching and acting and what they believed in. This underground community, run by Devorah, if you will, taught the philosophy of Avram and Sarah. And Devorah became an adherent of this lifestyle, and she imparted it to whom? Rivka. She taught Rivka the philosophy of Avram and Sarah, and that's how Rivka became Rivka. This pasuk is not, what's the right word? Extraneous to, right, thank you. Extraneous to the story. It is essential to this story. Now we can understand why the Torah found it appropriate to mention, as they were approaching Beit El and going to re-encounter whom? Yitzchak. They're going home to Yitzchak, right? In a very short while. Beit El is a stop for the Hebron, because Hebron is where Yitzchak is living. And we are going to reconnect with Yitzchak. The death of this old woman, who we never heard about, is essential, because in her death and her burial, we uncover, if you will, how Rivka became Rivka. Devorah's death and the naming the place where she is buried, the Rav says, were recorded because her life was of historic importance. He then concludes, the Rav says, Devorah was the leader of the moral underground movement. Devorah becomes the epitome of a woman who is willing to totally ignore her society that she's growing up and take the opposite approach. Correct? She is the underground moral community. This also teaches us that we need to credit the influences that honestly shape us. We have to take a step back. Maybe these whole 11 psukim are not only how we're supposed to approach God and thank Him, right? We learned tefillah, but life itself. We have to step back and say, how did I become me? Who influenced me to become me? And this Devorah story, this one little pasuk in there, is telling you, take a step back and think about who were your real influences that made you you. Yaakov is now ready to return after 21 years. He's going to see his father. What does the Torah tell us? He stopped, B'Shev Sham. He stopped, settled down. He had time to contemplate who were the real influences that helped him survive not only Esav on the one hand, but Lavan and his ideology and philosophy and lifestyle, and become Yaakov, who gets the name Yisrael as well. And who is it? Devorah. Devorah was a very important influence on Yaakov because he was the influence on his mother Rivka. And clearly, we know that Rivka oheves es Yaakov, right? The Torah told us Rivka had a very strong connection. One of those people who shaped his character was a woman we don't need to know much about. You need to know. Other people don't need to know. He needed to know. We never heard about her before, never hear about her again. It doesn't matter. For Yaakov, he said, that's the woman. That's my mother's confidant, was the woman who shaped my mother, but thereby she shaped me as well, right? Alon bechut, Rashi explains, alon, by the way, in Greek means another. Oh, when Yaakov is mourning Devorah's death, he's also mourning another death. Whose death? Rivka, his mother. So why is the Torah totally silent about Rivka's death? We know nothing about her funeral, right? Because she became Rivka via Devorah. Devorah was the secret of Rivka's life, and Devorah goes, if you will, to her grave, and Rivka goes to her grave. Only those two, if you will, knew that influence. They were connected, very quiet. Sometimes it's the very quiet people that have the most influence upon us. It's the Rivka who covered herself when she met Yitzchak, correct? When she sees Yitzchak, she covers herself. And her destiny was the cover up, if you will, even to her death. We know nothing about, she's covered up in her life, she's covered up in her death. But the Ramban suggests something totally different. That's one approach, right? The cover up, that is her destiny. No, quoting the Medrash, the Ramban says her death isn't mentioned out of respect to her. Think about it. Was Yaakov at his mother's funeral? No, Yaakov wasn't. Esav despised his mother, so he wasn't interested in going. He held a grudge against his mother. She took away the bracha from him. He has nothing nice to say about his mother. He's cussing her out. So does he go to her funeral? No. Yitzchak, what's his status? Yitzchak, her beloved husband, is blind. He's not even able to get out of the house. He's stuck home. He can't move on his own. He's stuck. So, if you will, no relatives, this is what the Ramban says, no relatives were there when she died. So who buried Rivka? The Ramban says, B'nai Chet. Is that something that you want to record for history? Instead of recording and documenting this sad state of affairs, the Torah chose silence, which is also a lesson. Sometimes silence is bigger honor than speaking all of the details. Not everybody needs to know. Don't tell. It's a lesson the Ramban is saying. But the Torah says there was nothing good to tell, so you didn't tell. Rivka gets buried in Maras HaMachpelah, yes, but who was there for her funeral? Yaakov wasn't there. Her son Esav hated her. Her beloved husband wasn't able to come. So who's taking care of her? The B'nai Chet? And that's what you're going to document in the Torah? Is that going to bring her kavod? Sometimes silence brings us more kavod than anything else. Continue on to the last pasuk. So now what happens? Vayera Elokim El Yaakov Od Devo Miparan Aram Vayevarechaso. So now Yaakov Hakadosh Baruch Hu now appears to Yaakov in Beitel. Vayomru Lo Elokim Shimcha Yaakov Lo Yikare Shimcha Od Yaakov Ti'im Yisrael Yeshemecha Vayikra Shemod Yisrael. He gets another name. The Seforno notes that this revelation that Yaakov has right now only occurs after the mourning for Devorah and Rivka ends. He says, if you pay attention to the progression here, the tears have to stop, and then only the divine can appear to you when you're in a state of happiness, correct? You can't have a prophetic moment when you're sad. And Yaakov gets this prophetic moment at what point? After he's finished mourning Rivka and Devorah. The Rav notes, number one, that Yaakov has a different experience than Avram. When Avram gets his name changed back in Perek Yitzayim Pasuk Hey, 17:5, it's Avram to Avraham. Do we ever call Avraham Avram again? Never. Chazal say if you do, you're a sinner, right? You're a sinner, if you will. You violated the rule. He's now called Avraham. You're never to call him Avram again, right? Was that the destiny of Yaakov? Was Yaakov not called Yaakov? Yaakov is called Yaakov. Yaakov is called Yisrael.
But it
Both
doesn't
names.
correct according to the words in the Chumash. The Chumash specifically says, Lo od yikare shimcha Yaakov. Your name shall not be called that. So
No, take a look. No. Rechama, look at Pasuk Yud at the beginning. Vayomer lo Elokim shimcha Yaakov. Lo yikare shimcha od Yaakov. Ti'im Yisrael. You're not just going to be named Yaakov. Od, you're going to get another name. You're going to get a name of Yisrael. And if you take a look at the wording by Avram, it's a wording of a little difference. It's not Od there. Here, there's an Od. You have an extra name. Both names are going to be used. The Ramban explains the two names reflect the role of Am Yisrael as we play out in history. At times, we're going to be Yaakov. At times, we're going to be Yisrael. At what is the difference? When we're dependent upon others, we're whom? Yaakov. When they're dependent upon us, when we're holding on to something, to someone, to another power, we're Yaakov. So, for example, throughout the time we're in Lavan's house, how is he referred to? He's referred to as Yaakov, right? Or in the story we just read, on how he tried to assuage Esav at the beginning of Vayishlach. This is the middle of Vayishlach, right? What happens? Who's he called? He's called Yaakov. He has that wager in battle with the angel, right? But before that, he's called Yaakov, right? He's only Yaakov. Finally, when he's ultimately able to destroy, if you will, overcome Esav, then he becomes Yisrael. Yisrael is when we're on our own and we're above everyone else. Yisrael reflects that we're no longer subservient to anyone. Yaakov comes from Ekev, from the heel. Yaakov is, you are subservient. When you're able to defeat the mysterious enemy, as the Rav says, during a long, lonely battle at night, then you emerge as Yisrael. Yisrael represents free and powerful Jew. Yaakov is the Jew that's dependent upon others. In other words, now let's answer our opening question. Remember at the very beginning I said there are 3 stories in these 11 psukim. The 3 stories, let's go back to the 3 stories. Yaakov prepares his family to return to Beit El and meet up eventually with Yitzchak, story 1. So they're going to Beit El, and from Beit El they're going to go to Hebron, but they're going to Beit El, so that's story 1. Story 2 was Devorah dies. Why was that inserted? And story number 3, Yaakov gets a new name, an added name. What is it? Yisrael. He's Yaakov and he's Yisrael. All of these stories Are they connected? Or are they three stories in the 9 psukim that have nothing to do with each other? What's the common denominator? So Rashi says the common denominator is, if you remember at the very beginning I said this, the common denominator is that 21 years. He's delayed getting back. It's a criticism of Yaakov. Yaakov, you should have moved quicker. But he was waiting for Devorah to come to tell him to come home. He was willing, okay, but that's that approach of Rashi, right? In other words, that's one approach. But the 9 psukim here describe how Yaakov returns to Beit El in preparation for his re-encounter after 21 years with his father. That's the connection. These 3 are stages in his reconnecting with his father. Stage 1, he has to remove all traces of influence of idolatry that has impacted his family. Because remember, the goal is to do what? To meet up and reconnect with his father, which he's going to do. He is going to see Yitzchak before Yitzchak dies. There is going to be a connection, once again, between a father and a son. There's no reconnection with the father and a mother. The mother dies and Yaakov never sees his mother again. Very sad, because he was really connected with his mother. He never sees his mother, right? So the progression, these 3 stages are the progression for what? His reunion with Yitzchak, right? So preparation 1, he has to remove all the traces of the influence of idolatry from his midst. Family, from him, you have to get, in other words, you have to do an appraisal. What negative things can I say I'm taking from Lavan and Bethuel? They're home. Bethuel's dead, but Lavan, right? What are the influences that I do not want to carry on with me into Eretz Israel? Second step was to express gratitude to Hashem for the amazing success. That's step number 2. There's 3 levels here. Number 1, get rid of the bad influences. Number 2, thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu that against all odds, not only did I not fail, but I succeeded beyond anyone's dream. Again, I repeat, I really do think that we have to stop and take an assessment of what happened to us after October 7th. There has to be a din v'cheshbon here. I'm not talking about, everybody's talking din v'cheshbon on a political government level. I think Klal Yisrael has to stop and take an assessment on how did we feel on October 7th? How do we feel today? And what transpired? Right? A lot transpired. And a lot we have to be very grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all of that. That's stage number 2. After that, he had to come to terms with who made him him, if you will. Who made me? The answer to this woman, Devorah was her name. And via this woman, he realized who his mother was, and the greatest influence on his life was his mother. Once that happened, he needs to be taught that there are 2 aspects to this journey in this world. One is he has to be referred as Yaakov, and one he has to be referred to Yisrael. Then he gets the name change. So again, the 3 stages. Number 1, he's going back to Beit El, to the reunion with his father, correct? And he has to prepare for that. Number 2, how does he prepare for that? He has to take an assessment of all the negative that he wants to, the bad baggage, leave it out. And he has to take, that's negative. The positive is to assess, how did I become me? And that's Devorah. And finally, what's the final? Who am I now going forward? What am I going to be? I'm going to be both Yaakov and Yisrael. So 3 stages, all connected as steps to the reunion of after 21 years with their father. So these 11 psukim are the preparation for what we're going to get next, which is Yitzchak and Yaakov reunite in Hebron.
My question is, wasn't his name changed so much earlier in
with the
Parsha?
angel.
The
right?
angel, but
Right.
not Hashem. Hashem doesn't change it. Hashem doesn't change it, right? The angel does. It's an illusion now for that which is coming here. Right.
I mean, I read somewhere too that the angel wanted to wait till Hashem was going to change it, but Yaakov forced the issue, said, I want
to
to
know.
acknowledge now.
Okay, that's one parish. But what we see is these 11 psukim are the stepstone of the reunion with their father, right? And these 3 points.
So is Devorah, is the Rav suggesting that underground, or is there evidence for it somewhere? Or is he just saying how
else does he understand it? How else do we understand it?
maybe
Who is this
nature
Devorah?
versus nurture? Maybe Devorah, just her nature was, it was not nurture in that environment. So is nature like born just with extra?
She wasn't a unique woman.
Mhm.
Yes. And there were other unique people, and Rivka becomes influenced by this Devorah.
Mhm,
That's correct. But it's a small little community.
mhm.
Quite often, these little communities get swallowed up into the bigger society, and we never hear of them. The Torah is telling us sometimes those have more influence on us than anything else. Correct? So what the Rav did was he took 11 psukim that seemed to be disconnected, and he weaves them into one beautiful story that we can now understand why they're here. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Before, Bezrat Hashem, we'll, yeah.
Was Luz the name?
Hopefully we'll have internet throughout the entire share.
Yeah, Luz was the name. You said Beitel and Luz are the same. So Luz was the name that it had before, and then
Yeah,
and then
Luz and
Yaakov
Beitel are both named.
gave the name Beit El. I mean, he named the monument like El Beit El, right? But he gave the name to the city, like renamed Luz Beit.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Is there any commentary on why it's repeated that Beit El is also Luz? I mean, it was mentioned before.
Yes. There are mefarshim that deal with that. Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
I was thinking, Rabbi, that in previous parashiyot it says something about Abraham and Sarah hanefesh yasar su b'charan, that Devorah among those people. I mean, I don't know if it says in Rashi or some Mefarish, she could be one of those people that got converted by, I mean, the family that was converted by Abraham and Sarah, or was
Devorah? What? They weren't in connection. They weren't near each other.
No.
Remember, Avram and Sarah are in the Canaan. This is in Haran.
Okay,
Right.
I thought, but
This is an underground in Haran.
that's what I thought. Hanefesh yasar b'charan. That's what I thought.
Oh, yeah, on the way before they went. Yes, yes. Oh, you mean you want to suggest that Devorah was influenced? Interesting.
No, I don't know. I just thought about
That was the underground then. Okay,
That's
interesting.
Maybe not particularly her family.
Interesting. Okay,
Okay.
I hear you. Very good.
But where
Okay,
she
right.
comes up
Okay.